Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story: military officer handles a soldier's resignation threat with malicious compliance, helping the soldier initiate the release process. The second story: when an abusive owner of a fast food chain criticized an employee's baking skills, the employee baked excessively, leading to a victorious resignation. The third story: when tasked with creating a 5-year plan for improving science education, a high school student and their teachers turned it into a satirical masterpiece. The first story is: offer to resign, I'll help. This is a few years old, but it's an incident that helped cement a certain reputation for me among those in my unit. I am an Army officer, and at the time, I was placed in charge of a very small group of soldiers that had a special skill set. I'm not talking special forces, but rather a niche technical capability that most soldiers would not ever train for, nor do they want to. This small platoon was often tasked with providing individual soldiers to augment the rest of the unit during their training events. At times, I could have 4 to 5 of my 12-soldier platoon tasked away. However, everyone knew that when we were training, others would have to augment us. It was just how things worked. I was new to the platoon, showing up at the beginning of September. Most of the soldiers seemed highly competent and motivated. However, one big dissatisfier was the augmentation tasks. I took note and promised I would see if I could get the tasks scaled down, as I had grand ideas for our own training program that would require us to have more people on the ground regularly. The first week in October, a task came out for a single soldier to augment an exercise at the end of the month. One corporal was next up in the rotation, so he was identified to the task. He was not pleased. He threatened to quit the Army if forced to go to the field for that task. It was not one that required our skill set, but a general duties task. I called his bluff. However, I was truly surprised to see a memorandum requesting his release on my desk the following morning. Cue my malicious compliance. I knew of the threat of release methods from my previous unit. People would threaten release if they did not get their way, and usually the superiors in the unit would back down. I would not. I complied exactly with his request, and then some. Usually when a memorandum for release appears, I would endorse the memorandum and leave it to the soldiers to start the release process on his own after giving him a set of instructions. People release for good reasons all the time, and it's not a difficult process. Make appointments for the clerks to start admin. Make an appointment with the command team to identify final date. Make appointments for medical and dental to get out clearance services, etc., etc. What I did is I took the time and effort and initiated his release for him. I saw the clerks. I went to the command team. I arranged his medical and dental. I contacted movements for his move to his hometown. I got an entire folder put together. I made all the appointments for him. All he had to do was show up at a designated place at a designated time to help the process along. It took me one busy afternoon to sort that out. The next morning, the corporal was at my desk. I invited him to sit down and I opened his folder. I showed him the endorsed memorandum. Surprise! I then walked him through his admin, his schedule, his release paperwork, and movements requests. But best of all, I got him the earliest possible release date, which was 6 months to the day from when he submitted his release memorandum. His jaw was sitting on my desk. He stammered a few sentences, but I cut him off. I also let him know that I arranged for all his appointments so that he would still be able to go to the field at the end of the month to support that training. We needed him out there, and his schedule was now synchronized into that event. He was floored. Now, I am not an absolute tyrant. I also left a set of instructions inside the file that would allow him to rescind his release. Simply put, policy stated that if a memorandum withdrawing release was submitted and endorsed within 30 days, there would be no problems canceling the release. I pointed that out to him and told him that I was leaving for 21 days on a course, and that if there was a memorandum on my desk to pull the release, I would certainly endorse it. When I returned, that memorandum was there. I endorsed it and actioned canceling his release. My reputation was made. Don't cross the captain. Further, I cemented my role as commander by getting changes to the augmentation to allow us to achieve some more training aims. The corporal and I had a good laugh months later about it. He asked if I would have allowed him to release. I stopped him cold when I said I would. I didn't want people on my team that don't want to be there. But after that event, everyone in the platoon did not want to be anywhere else. Note: my non-commissioned officers were involved in this, but as they had been in the platoon for much longer, they were used to people backing down. My malicious compliance here surprised them and gave them an appreciation for taking a bit of a harder line without overdoing it. We can see the importance of effective leadership and agility in circumstances where you face challenges in command. The captain demonstrated his determination and ability to follow the rules, when one of the soldiers threatened to leave the army because he was dissatisfied with the task at the training ground. Instead of leaving it up to the soldier, the captain decided to give him the opportunity he requested, but did so in a way that made it a real requirement. This helped to earn him respect and sent a message to everyone in the unit he was not to be toyed with. At the same time, the captain also demonstrated his ability to solve problems and got permission to change the training plan so that the team could conduct more training activities. We see how a determined and intelligent leader can influence a unit and solve problems even in difficult situations. Good job. The second story is, owner tells me to bake, so I bake. This happened to me several years ago when I was in high school. I used to work for a large Canadian fast food chain, who shall not be named, that is known for coffee called Tim Hortons. The specific store I worked at had incredible turnover, still does many years later. So because I stayed the longest, being 2 months, and managed to learn generally what to do, since we didn't get any training, I was put on the floor to register and told good luck. I was promoted to baker, not a horrible position, didn't have to deal with customers much, was on my own in the back, could listen to music and make whatever food I wanted to regardless of the time. It was actually pretty great. The workers, the ones that stayed, were all friendly and great to talk to. Some customers were, but most weren't, which always made things a drag. It amazes me how upset people get when their coffee isn't done at least 5 minutes before getting into the store. Anyway, the owner was an absolute bee. I've gotten severely burned by the coffee machine dumping brewing coffee all over me, which was a known problem with said machine, and the only concern she had for me was my shirt not being tucked in. I, like everyone else, hated her with a burning, no pun intended, passion. The final straw came when she came in one day while I was baking away, and she started to show me how to do it properly. Mind you, I was making things up as I went, because I didn't get trained for this either. Fine, I appreciated it. However, I'm not sure what I did wrong, but over the course of an hour I was called useless, worthless, and a moron. Being 16 at the time and very shy, I was in shock and didn't say much to it. Eventually, thankfully, she went back out front and left me to my own devices. Later that evening, I had just cleaned out the glaze tray, which the glaze and tray are supposed to be changed and cleaned daily, which is more so weekly there, when one of the new people came in and told me Karen, the owner, wanted me to make some donut which required the glaze. I asked how many were out there, and there were enough, and since I was leaving within an hour and had far too much work to do, I said no and continued. Oh boy, wrong idea. Karen came storming in and told me that if I tell you to do something, you do it. Now make donuts now or you're not leaving. So I did. Pretty angry that she talked to me like that, but whatever. After coming out of her office, she said the most glorious thing that to this day I'm so happy she said. You're a baker. All you do is bake. And bake I did. Needless to say, my resignation was given in the next day. Apparently, she had called my parents and told them that I had to come in, and was very upset when my mom told her I was at school, which was true. The manager on duty was confused that I didn't know that I was taken off the schedule, and since I had handed my 2 weeks in before she said that, I can safely say I haven't yet been fired. I later found out from a friend, who had gotten me hired, that Karen came to him within the week and said, and I quote, "Yeah, so I had to fire Name. He baked like over 100 bagels last night among other things, and we had to throw it all out. She lost a lot of money, I know. You told me to bake, Karen, so I baked." Edit. I get that it's a bit confusing, and to clarify, I gave in my 2 weeks notice before being told I was fired, so technically I wasn't fired. Edit 2. Some of you probably think I said her name is Karen, as that's what these kinds of people are called, but no, ironically, her name is actually Karen. I think the OP's thoughts were something like this. Oh, Karen, you took it upon yourself to teach me how to bake properly, but I was young and ignorant. How could I understand you? Oh, wise baking master. So I listened to your command and started baking. And I baked, Karen. I baked everything I could. To eat, to throw away, to give away, to sell, to buy, everything that is related to baking. I baked a lot of buns and they became part of a story that you'll remember for a long time. Here's your long-term baking strategy. Let everyone understand that all you do is bake. Let you be remembered as Karen, who first taught me how to bake. To you, Karen, extraordinary warmth during the hellish baking. There's nothing like a good dose of laughter to help you understand how to do things the right way. And as it turned out, your hell of a skill set was invaluable. Karen must be sorry to have lost you along with all those buns. The third story is, you must have a 5-year plan. In high school, I was the overachieving D-bag who got elected student body president during my senior year. But in my fall term, I suddenly found myself with a new and far more odious responsibility. Mandatory 5-year plan meetings. District-wide science scores on standardized tests had been falling for a while. A new superintendent was put in place, and he was bound and determined to turn things around. He demanded that each school submit a 5-year plan for bringing the curriculum up to standards. He wanted student input too. All student body presidents would be required to contribute a chapter to the report. Suddenly, in the middle of college application essays and studying for finals, I'm stuck in after-school meetings about this stupid plan. Yes, stupid. You see, some years before my arrival at this school, a group of dedicated teachers came together to bring in the IB diploma program. It correctly dubbed itself the most rigorous high school program in the city. High-achieving students from all over the area flocked to it. Within a decade, our SH district was regularly sending kids to Harvard and Stanford, mostly to become science majors. So when the superintendent started wagging his finger at our teachers about test scores, they didn't take to it kindly. They told me in no uncertain terms that the report was pure political theater. Still, we had to submit a report about meeting standards, and I had to write one of the chapters. Here's what we concluded. While it was pointless to make adjustments to the IB science curriculum, which was literally following international standards, we did identify several ways we could improve access to lab facilities for kids outside of IB. To my surprise, I actually liked what we were proposing. I even started seeing some merits to the exercise. The thing is, there was no way it would take us 5 years to implement these changes. So we submitted our report with a pledge to implement all the changes within 1 year. What go-getters we were. The superintendent's response? I asked for a 5-year plan, and I expect a 5-year plan. He demanded a whole new report. It didn't matter how good our scores looked. He wanted to be able to say the words 5-year plan to the press. Now the teachers were peeved. At our next meeting, the science department chair, Mr. Janikowski, announced a new approach. Here's how we'll divide up the chapters. Sarah, you write the first chapter. Year 1. Aligning ourselves with local standards. Mrs. Perez protested. But what local standards? Doesn't matter, said Mr. Janikowski. Fill it with whatever fluff you want. Make it sound technical and official, but ultimately say nothing. He turned to the freshman chemistry teacher. Jim, you write the second chapter. Year 2. Aligning ourselves with state standards. Jim shrugged okay. Good. Cassandra, you take Year 3. National standards. Brent, you take Year 4 international standards. Then he turned to me, a massive grin on his face. And you, OP, you can take Year 5, intergalactic standards. At that moment, if you could have snapped a picture of any one of our faces, it would look like the cat who ate the canary. Here's an actual sentence I wrote. It is difficult, perhaps impossible, to instill students with a true sense of unbridled aspiration if we confine their expectations to planetary norms. I suggested conferences with extraterrestrial educators, hosting the next Science Bowl on Mars, and mandatory meetings between the superintendent and his alien counterparts. We submitted the report, fully expecting the swift ire of the superintendent. Instead, we heard nary a peep. I guess the district didn't care what was in the reports just so long as we had them. At the press conference, the superintendent proudly displayed the reports from each school. The story made the news on some of the lesser channels, and I think the governor invited him to lunch. Then in the summer after I graduated, someone leaked a copy of our report to the local paper. Then more stories came out about how the superintendent had ties to a contracting company that received a major bid to renovate a football track and field, even though the budget was significantly higher than other proposals, and the renovations were less extensive. He resigned shortly thereafter. As for our school, the teachers stuck to their initial plan to improve lab access, and the press exposure only helped more parents learn about our school's high scores. I think enrollment actually jumped the next year. You have an incredible sense of humor, OP, but this intergalactic standards thing is out of the ordinary. You obviously decided to submit an overly ambitious plan to send a message to the superintendent that you won't be able to implement it within 5 years. Your team proved to be masters with words and confident in their plans for intergalactic education. A way out of a situation like this is a real event in the world of education. Hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe. Have a good day.